Hey, what's up guys? Kalamazi here, and with progression being over for a few weeks now, I wanted to take a look at what specs ended up being the best for each Eternal Palace boss and how they function on each fight. Before we get into that, if you're interested in any weak auras or add-ons you see here, I'll place a link to my Twitch and Discord in the description where you can find them all. I will also place a link to the most recent top Warlock parses on Warcraft logs for each fight if you want to take a closer look at any of those. Now, if you remember back to the start of the tier, Destruction was hyped up to be the best spec overall by many heading into week 1 overall, but ended up not performing as well until the 5% buff it received. Now, I don't think it was just the 5% buff that pushed Destro from not seeing so much play to where it is now, but it certainly did help a bit. Let's jump right into this and talk about how things truly ended up playing out over the course of Eternal Palace. Abyssal Commander Sivara is the closest thing that we received to a patchwork boss this tier. Initially, many people, including myself, were pretty hyped about Demonology on the first few bosses, as they were mostly single target bosses, and the VOP major builds with multiple Baleful/Supreme Commander Azrael traits had the potential to bring some insane damage. Unfortunately, these builds are also extremely RNG dependent, and bring mediocre damage at best with average Tyrant procs. Sure, you can get some insane Tyrant RNG back to back, but it's not very common, which is the reason you typically see a few demo builds sprinkled mostly into a sea of Affliction parses, typically consisting of Cascading Calamity trait stacking. While other traits such as Inevitable Demise and Loyal to the End are not bad choices, Cascading Calamity is hands down our strongest overall single target choice as Affliction. Blackwater Behemoth is mostly a single target fight with a bit of initial cleave onto the pufferfish. Behemoth, in similar fashion to Sivara, has mostly been an Affliction/Destruction fight. You do see Inevitable Demise in a few parses due to the fact that the pufferfish provide a good bit of agony cleave/ID abuse, but outside of that, it's mostly a single target fight with one, potentially two intermissions depending on how high your DPS is. There have also been some Destruction parses which have been running Rolling Havoc and some that have not, which have put up decent numbers overall on Behemoth. Personally, I feel at this point that Affliction is the best way to go here, as you don't have a great way to truly abuse some of Destruction's more powerful traits like Flashpoint or even Rolling Havoc in a sense if the pufferfish die quickly enough. Now, Radiance of Azshara is the first fight where we really start to see a mix of all three Warlock specs performing well. The intermission timing lines up pretty well with Demo's Demonic Tyrant CD, and with it being on such a short cooldown, also gets you one more full Tyrant before the fight actually ends. Sadly, Destro's CDs don't line up as well with them being around the 2-minute 10-second mark, but you're still able to get a full CD cycle out once Phase 2 completes and you transition back to Phase 1. With Affliction's Starkglare being a 3-minute CD, barring running VOP minor essences, you're pretty much in the same boat as Destro. However, kill time is even more important here. A kill time of 3 minutes and 20 seconds or so, for example, won't allow for a full Darkglare cycle mostly, which is why we're starting to see people running VOP as a minor essence as Affliction. It allows for a full second Darkglare before the boss dies, but does not accommodate CLF's 3-minute CD very well. While we have not seen a whole lot of kills around the 320-ish mark, we certainly will continue to see kill times dropping the longer we're in Eternal Palace. In the end, I think all three specs hold merit here, each bringing their own bit of utility to the fight. If I were to play Demo, however, I would look to run the much more consistent CLF build and not the VOP based one. There really is no room for Flashpoint/Rolling Havoc abuse as Destro here, and most of Affliction's builds are running either triple Cascading Calamity or mixing in one Inevitable Demise trait. Lady Ashvane started off mostly as an Affliction fight, but over the course of time was also shifted into a pretty even split of Demo to AF with a few Destro parses sprinkled in. When running Vision of Perfection as either a major or minor, Demonology does not really have to follow the hold CD strat that most guilds follow. You can Tyrant on pull and then have your Demonic Tyrant for the first burn phase, once again for second shield, and then finally again for a fourth time in the final phase. Affliction has to pretty much sit on every CD except Phantom Singularity for the first burn phase, and Destro's also in a similar spot with its 2-minute CD cycles. With kills getting faster and faster, and guilds attempting to 2-phase the boss in actual progression, Demonology gained a lot of ground here overall. I think that both AF and Demo are better choices here than Destro due to how CD timing lines up. You're also not able to get any real Flashpoint or Rolling Havoc abuse on Briny Bubbles as they simply die too fast and then become useless dead traits. I do prefer VOP major builds here of Demonology, as if you were to run CLF, its actual CD timing would be a bit awkward with burn phases and such, which, as mentioned, is one of the strengths of Demo here. Affliction typically runs as much of a single target build, meaning triple cascading calamity, as possible here due to the nature of the fight. When we get to Orgozoa, however, things begin to shift a bit here towards the destruction end of the spectrum, which I'm actually okay with. Destruction builds running VOP Major with multiple Rolling Havoc and Flashpoint traits here reign supreme, as the consistent Havoc based cleave potential here is through the roof. With the mythic ability spawning Za'qul adds much more frequently, there's always a second target for your Havoc when it comes off CD. Having access to Rolling Havoc at will, as well as relatively high uptime on Flashpoint, brings so much value to the fight, both AoE and single target wise. VOP based Infernal procs bring with them extra Immolation Aura damage and also further extend your Supremacy windows for an additional 10 seconds. Chaining them together can lead to some ridiculous DPS. When you hit phase 2, it gets even better. If you were to play Affliction here, builds consisting of multiple Inevitable Demise traits bring a decent bit of value to the fight, as you can generate pretty high amounts of ID stacks quickly with the adds that are present. Personally, I feel that Destro is the best choice here overall, and if you truly don't want to play Destro, you should then play AF for the ID cheese aspects of the fight. I just don't feel that Demo really brings enough value to be worth it overall here. The thing with Destro and Orgozoa is that it does take a pretty specific Azerite set to truly bring massive numbers compared to AF or Demo in a sense. The more Flashpoint / Rolling Havoc traits you can get, the better. You do still mostly want your one Crashing Chaos trait for the CD reduction and such, but it certainly was, and partially still is, a limiting factor for me during progression and on farm. The 5% Destro buff did help push the spec even higher here, but it still was in a great place if you had the right traits before, regardless. Destro is also in a very similar spot when it comes to Queen's Court. The builds running multiple Rolling Havoc / Flashpoint pieces truly crush and damage overall. With it being a consistent 2-target encounter, you're certainly not lacking a second target for your Havoc windows. Now, some guilds prefer to push one boss to 35% for execute range, then swap to the other, which means between that and the semi-frequent spark spawns, you should be able to have a relatively high Flashpoint uptime for the first half of the fight, and then windows of it until later on when the fight actually is over. Obviously, the massive intellect buff that Rolling Havoc brings is a huge plus here as well. I also love VOP Major builds for Destro here, simply due to the nature of the fight, and if you're able to chain multiple Infernals back to back and then head into a Havoc window, your damage is just going to skyrocket. Affliction builds here running multiple ID pieces are also a strong choice and gain more value in a progression setting due to the damage the fight deals. Having a strong self-heal every so often is pretty big, however at this point it is not as much of a factor as I feel it was a few months ago during actual progression. I have played both Absolute Corruption and Siphon Life here, and feel that Siphon Life, while a bit more of a headache on the fight, brings the most actual value. With it being a perma 2-target fight, I just don't feel that Demonology is really a spec that you should be playing here in a progression setting. Za'qul is actually the only fight this tier that I played Demonology on as far as progression was concerned. The consistent AoE based cleave that Demo brings for smaller ag control, as well as short Tyrant CD cycles, really made it a great choice when ads were of great concern. They still need to die before they transform and effectively wipe the raid, but at this point, for many, it's much less of a concern. In similar fashion to the last two bosses, a destruction build running multiple Rolling Havoc / Flashpoint pieces here will typically bring the most raw damage. You typically always have targets for your Rolling Havoc, and many targets to proc Flashpoint off of as well. While a lot of Rolling Havoc cleave will be useless ag cleave in a sense, the Rolling Havoc intellect stacks certainly are not, and the ads do still need to die. If it lines up well with a Puncture Darkness or CD cycle, your damage truly does soar. Most of the Destro builds are running VOP Major here, and I've seen a few that are running Lucid Major as well. As far as Demo is concerned, I ran VOP Major for our kill in an Azerite build consisting of triple Baleful, 2 Supreme Commander, and 1 Demonic Meteor. I do feel that both Destro and Demo bring a lot more to this fight overall utility-wise than AF does, but at this point with mostly everyone having 65 or so on your neck, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot if you want to play AF and play a half gimped spec on this fight in a sense. CD usage and such will depend on your Delirium assignments potentially, so be sure to keep that in mind when planning CDs later on into the fight. Finally, we have Azshara. I want to say first that I feel LOS-based mechanics are not a good idea / very enjoyable, and hope to not see them moving forward. The fight overall has 4 phases in which I feel different specs excel more than others, but phase 3 is the most concerning overall. Phase 1 is a 2-target cleave phase with an ad spawn that needs to be burned down as soon as possible. Both ID AF and Havoc Destro do a solid job at this. Phase 2 is mostly a single target burn phase outside of the devoted ads that spawn about 40 or so seconds into the fight. Both Destro with Cataclysm, Immolation Aura, Rain of Fire, and Af with Phantom Singularity, Seed of Corruption, and Agony/ID Abuse can make good work of these ads as well. Phase 3, however, is the toughest part of the fight where you need to beat a few DPS checks when looking at 3 ads that spawn, in addition to also controlling DPS on Myrmidons and DPSing Azshara a bit towards the end of Phase 3. Rolling Havoc Destro with potentially a Flashpoint trade or two does bring extra value here for those burst windows, but I'm not a huge fan of the triple Rolling Havoc double Flashpoint parses that we've seen emerge recently for progression. ID Affliction also brings a lot to the fight here with self-healing, as well as max ID stack bursts on ads that either die quickly or before Myrmidons cast another spear. Once you get past Phase 3, Phase 4 is a pure single target burn phase in which the Rolling Havoc/Flashpoint builds basically have just simply dead Azerite traits. Af, on the other hand, here with ID traits still can make good use of them, especially heading in with a full ID stack, and you have to also take into consideration the self-healing. I will say, however, that if you do receive the Essence of Azeroth buff in the final phase, that Destro can take much greater advantage of it than Affliction can. Having all of your destruction spells as instant cast will push your damage through the roof compared to Affliction, which already has a decent bit of less impactful non-burst space instant cast as is. If it actually happens during an Infernal window, well, grats on your rank 1 parse. Truly though, in the end, Phase 3 is the hardest part of Mythic Azshara, so I don't really mind a Rolling Havoc trade or two, but I'm not in love with the full-on hard commit Rolling Havoc Flashpoint builds for progression. I think that both Af and Destro are great choices here, and the frontrunner really is not 100% clear if you remove the Phase 4 Essence of Azeroth RNG. Sadly, once again, Demonology is not well suited for this fight due to the nature of the spec being just so single target based. Affliction typically looks to mix in a few ID pieces while running its baseline CLF Azerite build here, but Destro actually has a pretty interesting mix of CLF, VOP, and Lucid Major builds present, so I would encourage you to look through them for yourself and see which build best suits you and your raid overall. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video gave you all a better look at what specs are performing the best on each fight in Eternal Palace at this point. In the end, I really did enjoy EP as a whole. I felt that Ashvane was a great mid-tier boss, and the same can be said for Orgozoa. I was not a huge fan of Queen's Court or the Azshara fight, but the raid, in my book, was a big success. Let me know what you thought of the raid and what your favorite boss was below in the comments, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them there as well. Remember that if you're interested in any weak auras or profiles you've seen here, you can grab them all directly from my Twitch or Discord, which are also in the description. If you want to see more WoW content and help support the channel, smash those like, share, and subscribe buttons, as your support really helps. Thanks guys, and I'll see y'all on stream. Peace.